Prime Minister Narendra Modi there addressing the nation a day before the rollout of the GST reforms. The GST 2.0 is called it. Bachat Ka Utsav is called it. A festival of savings, because the day one of the new GST regime will be the same as day one of the Navratri celebrations. Prime Minister Modi announcing a festival bonanza and talking about how different sections of society will benefit greatly from these new and improved GST and the reforms that it comes with. Two slabs only, 5% and 18%. Prime Minister Modi reiterating how nearly 99% of daily use items from higher tax slabs like 12% and 18% brought down to 5% or 0% in this new GST regime. We have Mr. Nitin Desai, former Chief Economic Advisor and Secretary, Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance, Government of India, now joining us. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Nitin Desai. We also have Mr. A.K. Bhattacharya, Editorial Director, Business Standard, with us. Thank you, Mr. Bhattacharya, for taking time out to be with us. Let me begin by asking Mr. Nitin Desai, it is a big announcement, a big change in the country's centralized tax, the one tax that applies across the country, and it couldn't have come at a better time. The timing is very important, isn't it? This is a time when you have lesser taxes on daily needs, essentials. It will be felt better by the people of India.
GST as a common tax across the country came a little earlier. It came about 8 years ago.
Correct.
So that's always been there. And what has been happened now is something that most economists have been arguing for a long time. Because when it was introduced in 2017, there were too many tax rates specified. GST works when there are fewer tax rates. So what has happened now with the 5% and 18% is something that was argued for by almost every economist who wrote about GST. One point I will make is that there has been a rising tendency of indirect taxes. If you look at the numbers from 2010 onwards, the share of indirect taxes in total tax has gone up somewhat. The share of personal income tax has gone up, and the share of corporate tax has come down in the total tax collection. So one of the things that one should recognize is that it's not necessarily a gift to people. Not necessarily a gift. It's something that you have to pay. And one hopes that with the reduction to 5% from 12% to, not so much from 18, it's from 12% to 5%, it will help people for buying things. Whether it will lead to an increase in demand, let us see, let us hope. And there the second point that he made is relevant. Since a great deal of the stuff that is today being purchased by poor people also, it comes not from Indian production but from outside. The impact is very different. So he quite correctly emphasized that dimension also. So let us say that this is something that most economists have wanted, and it's good that it has been done, and let's hope that it has. But we must also at some point ask ourselves whether we continue to have so large a proportion of our tax collection coming from indirect taxes. If you want, I can show a graph shows that.
Right, Mr. Bhattacharya, there are two things over here. One is the relief that the common man gets, the common people get with the GST, and that is on top of the relief that they've got in terms of income tax as well. So in that sense, it's a double bonanza for the so-called middle class and the new middle class, the neo-middle class.
Well, of course, I think what I found quite significant and interesting in what the Prime Minister said in his brief 20-minute address is the linkage that he is establishing between tax reforms and economic rejuvenation. In a sense that he is saying that taken together, the income tax relief up to 12 lakh of annual income with rebates and the GST relief, the total tax bonanza that has been announced in the same year is almost 2.5 lakh crore, which is close to 0.75% of GDP. So I don't think in recent years we have seen this kind of demand side push through policies. What we have seen in post COVID is that a lot of supply side measures have been taken. The government has spent more money in the capital expenditure side, infrastructure creation, etc., etc. But in this year, you have seen a certain shift in the government's approach to reviving the economy and sustaining the growth rate by giving this 0.755% of GDP, that amount of demand push by reducing taxes, therefore giving that 2.5 lakh crore extra money in the hands of people, hoping that consumers will pump that money into the market by buying more goods and services. So this is the connection that he is drawing between the GST reform and the income tax reform before that, with a kind of an revival of economic growth or sustaining economic growth. Now, don't forget that he's also introduced a new concept of economic self-reliance, and he is urging that while you go in for the festival and participate in the festival of savings, don't forget that you must try to see in what way you can buy more Indian goods and Indian services. So I think there is also that political element in that statement of his today, wherein he's saying that yes, economic growth is important, but equally important for him is to enhance economic self-reliance. Whether that he achieves that goal or not is time will tell, but I think it's a very important sense signaling he is giving by saying that tax reform leading to economic rejuvenation and helping the nation to in its goal towards achieving Swadeshi or economic self-reliance with the help of MSMEs. So I think is what we are seeing in the Prime Minister's speech today is an outlining of a shift in towards demand side measures to revive economy or sustain the economy, as well as trying to go and embrace a new kind of economic development model.
Right, Mr. Nitin Desai, in that sense, we are a consumption-driven economy at the end of the day, and measures that can boost consumption will be pivotal as far as India's economic growth momentum is concerned. And as far as boosting consumption goes, nothing like bringing down GST rates on so many daily needs essentials. And at the same time, you're talking about a tax regime that's going to make things easier for Indians to consume things that are Indian. So there are three sets to that speech of Prime Minister. One is the fact that he began by talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat and self-reliance, and self-reliance driven by India's economic growth, driven by consumption, and hence the importance of GST reforms and, of course, the reduction in income tax as well. And then, of course, once you have all this money in your hands, the clear direction from the Prime Minister is that take that money and go out and buy Indian goods, Indian products.
Certainly, I would say that the improvement in GST, the reduction in GST is definitely positive when it comes to raising demand growth. Whether that will lead to demand growth necessarily for non-imported products is something we can see. That's more a question of choice. Let me just stress one thing, though. When you talk in terms of improving people's income, please keep in mind how we collect taxes. 65% of our taxes come from indirect taxes. 65%, two-thirds almost. And in many ways, that's the tax which is spread out amongst everybody. The new middle class, etc., they're all liable to a GST. Whereas if we look at the income tax, it's restricted largely to upper income people. And in what has happened over the past 15 years is a gradual rise in the share of taxation from indirect taxes. It was somewhere around 60% in 2010-11. It's 65% now, and the direct taxes, which were around 40% in 2010-11, have come down to 34%. So what I would urge is that please keep in mind that in the long run, if you really want poor people, then people are becoming new middle class people to be buyers, etc. Don't expect them to pay so large a proportion of their spending in terms of taxation. So this is the main point around it. But the reform of GST is perfectly good, acceptable, and I hope, will lead to an improvement in demand. And there is some evidence that it is leading to some improvement in demand.
Mr. Bhattacharya, then the question of whether it's important to pass on the benefits, just like how it's important for banks to pass on the benefits of a rate cut. It becomes important for the big for corporate India to ensure that the benefits are passed on, and in that sense they have a great incentive now. This is the peak period for corporate India, for India Inc. The next these 3 months, these festival months are going to be important, and in that sense, the transmission of the GST rate cut into the hands of the people could still be very smooth.
Well, yeah, you are right there, because please remember, in the first week of September, these rate cuts were announced. In a sense, the GST Council announced the rate cuts in September 3. Now, September 3 to September 20. Now, there is some sort of a deferment of the kind of purchases that people would have otherwise made. Of course, there is a period of 10 days when people normally don't buy goods. So I would expect that there will be a sudden revival of purchases of goods and services from tomorrow, given the fact that the different companies, all kinds of companies have announced cuts in, whether it is a car company or whether it is a durable goods producer or an FMCG company like Amul. Now, what is clearly that these companies, if you look at the manner in which they have cut the rates, it is clear that they are using the new GST rates, the reduced rates, not just to pass on the benefits, but also to boost their sales. I mean, take the example of the country's largest auto company. It has given more benefit than it has received through the tax cut for a category of cars which are at the lower end of the segment. So what you are doing is actually what this Indian company India Inc. is doing is that trying to use this opportunity to revive sales in segments which have got more demand potential. So I do agree with you that the government's exhortation, because please remember that the earlier that GST instrument by which you could force companies to pass on the benefits is no longer there, which is a good thing that they did away with. But the government has clearly put its weight behind the corporate sector, the India Inc., to ensure that they pass on the benefits and it achieves the goals for which these cuts were announced. Now, there is only one question that the Prime Minister did not address, which is about what happens to the revenues that may be foregone, at least in the current year. The hope is that there will probably be higher sales and more sales, and therefore that loss will be made good through buoyancy or higher collections of taxes. Now, that is something that one has to keep a close eye on, because the government's own estimate says that on an annualized basis, most probably the losses would be around 1 lakh crore or so, because if you say the 6 months are left in the year, the government is estimating 48,000 crore of revenues foregone. So it is possible that it might be a bit of a challenge to meet the fiscal consolidation targets of 4.5% of GST, as a result of which you remember the Standards and Poor had actually improved our rating. So I think fiscal consolidation has been a very, very important achievement of this government post-COVID. And one hopes that the tax reform or the tax cuts that have been announced in this year will not lead to a kind of a tax foregone, which may make the government's task in achieving the fiscal consolidation goals little more challenging and difficult.
All right, stay with us. Let's then again listen to a quick snippet of that address by Prime Minister Modi, the one focusing on self-reliance.
आज जाने अनजाने हमारी रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी में बहुत सी विदेशी चीजें जुड़ गई है, हमें पता तक नहीं है। हमारे जेब में कंघी विदेशी है कि देसी हमें पता ही नहीं है। हमें इनसे भी मुक्ति पानी होगी। हम वो सामान खरीदें जो मेड इन इंडिया हो, जिसमें हमारे देश के नौजवानों की मेहनत लगी हो, हमारे देश के बेटे बेटियों का पसीना हो। हमें हर घर को स्वदेशी का प्रतीक बनाना है, हर दुकान को स्वदेशी से सजाना है। गर्व से कहो ये स्वदेशी है, गर्व से कहो मैं स्वदेशी खरीदता हूं, मैं स्वदेशी सामान की बिक्री भी करता हूं। ये हर भारतीय का मिजाज बनना चाहिए। जब ये होगा तो भारत तेजी से विकसित होगा। मेरा आज सभी राज्य सरकारों से भी आग्रह है, आत्मनिर्भर भारत के इस अभियान के साथ, स्वदेशी के इस अभियान के साथ अपने राज्यों में मैन्युफैक्चरिंग को गति दे, पूरी ऊर्जा से, पूरे उत्साह से जुड़े, निवेश के लिए माहौल बढ़ाएं। जब केंद्र और राज्य मिलकर आगे बढ़ेंगे तो आत्मनिर्भर भारत का सपना पूरा होगा।
And now we also have Dr. Nisha Nujmuddin, Professor of Economy at BSA Crescent University, also joining us on the broadcast. Thank you for joining us. Requesting Mr. Bhattacharya and Mr. Nitin Desai to stay with us. Dr. Nisha Nujmuddin, Prime Minister Modi taking time out specifically a day before the rollout of GST 2.0 to hail it. You know, you've seen all the discussions since the announcement of the new GST regime with just 2 slab rates. Really, I mean, this is a point where he's focusing, is asking the nation to take note and also act on it in a particular way. Don't just celebrate the fact that you have lesser GST rates. Ensure that you give that benefit to in a goods made of Indian origin.
So GST 2.0 is indeed from a tax complexity to a tax simplicity or a tax clarity is what they're claiming out. And as our Honorable PM Modi ji said, it's a big step towards self-reliant or Atmanirbhar Bharat, as he always said. But then, you know, when there is a 2 tax rate or a slab, currently from 4 we made it to 2, and it is leading to huge savings, I would say. But at the same time, we need to have a understanding that from the critic point of view or from the economic point of view, I would say that though there is a benefit also, the mid-tier goods, they move from 18%, which again leads to the inflationary pressures in the economy. See, when you talk about uniform rates for so many commodities, we need to understand that in our country, India, we do not have uniform income for all the categories or sections of people. That is again one thing to be noted. And now it's a huge relief to the middle class people is another statement that was said. This is indeed good because, you know, around 2.5 lakh crore, was saved in taxes. But the flat tax actually hits the salaried and the urban poor. That is again, what is the kind of solution that the GST 2.0 is doing it? Actually, GST 2.0 is nailing if clarity, simplicity, and governance is being taken properly. But then again, when they are not focusing on the progressive taxation, because we are taxed based on the income perspective in India. But today, when progressivity in taxation itself is a question mark, the regressive impact is coming again. So that has to be again taken into consideration. And as Modi ji has addressed beautifully, the youth of our country is benefiting too much from this, wherein the startups or the MSMEs, it gets quite simpler. The filings get very simpler. But now, though that is a case also, as I mentioned before, do we really think that this so-called new GST 2.0 that is, actually benefiting the salaried or the income group equally like the startup or the MSME? That is again a question mark which have to be answered as well. And with regard to job creations, employment opportunities, a huge boost in demand is there. And indeed, the economic impact is amazingly great. But now again, when you kind of compare them with the, short-term slowdown because of the price hike or inflation, will this job creation or the boost in demand really fulfill the, entire need is another question to be addressed. So I mean, I feel it is a very great move. That's, as I said, the tax simplicity is there. But then oversimplification sometimes ignores the real diversity also. So those kind of things also need to be, given a little of more attention is what I feel. See, one India, one tax vision, wow, that is fulfilled. That is the concept of federalism what we have. And GST 2.0 is trying to fulfill that. But at the same time, we should not forget to understand that the state's autonomy may weaken further in this particular perspectives also. So though the goal is to for a push for the economic growth, to give great relief for the middle class also, we need to understand that the factor called inflationary pressures, that also needs to be managed. Otherwise, it will actually lead to a lot of issues, what I personally feel in this perspective. Because see, GST simplification, as I said, it may be good for traders. But inflation complication for the middle class is a big question mark, which has to be addressed immediately. Otherwise, the benefits of GST2 cannot be utilized completely. Right. See, what was 12% yesterday will be 18% tomorrow.
Yeah. Right, point taken. Ms. Nitin Desai, do you still think that there are threats of inflationary pressure with the new rationalized GST regime?
I would not. Yes, she has raised a point about the inflationary pressure, Nisha. And it's possible it will be there. There's another reason why you may see this. We are making pressure for people buying domestic goods rather than imported ones. And please remember, one of the reasons the imported goods are so widespread is because they're much cheaper. So in a sense, you're asking people to move from a cheaper good to a more expensive good, because more expensive good is domestically produced. So I do not rule out that possibility. But right now, the inflation problem is not that acute. And if we get something, we may get some modest rise in that. But essentially, I go back to my old game, which is that really, if we are interested in helping the poor and the new middle class, ask yourself, how am I going to raise the taxes? You're telling them, now I'm going to collect a little less from you. Whereas the reality is we must reverse what has happened over the past 15 years in the rising proportion of indirect taxes in tax revenue and a fall in corporate taxes in tax revenue. Personal taxes have, of course, gone up somewhat. The other point I would make is that in some ways the reality of life for poor people is they go to places where no tax is charged. This is the practical reality of life for very poor people. So do keep that in mind as far as. But I hope that this lowering from 12% to 5% will reduce that challenge. That it will reduce that fact that there was a significant amount of transactions being done without avoiding taxes. That may come down significantly. But yes, there is a risk. There is a risk that Nisha that mentioned, but it's not something that I would worry about right now too much.
Okay, Nisha, quickly, your closing comment.
Yeah. So I really appreciate, and I'm very happy to hear the beautiful comments said by Nitin sir as well. Very nice, sir. Even I feel happy to hear that. But to add a small point to that, sir, see, don't we think that the progressivity is what we are losing today, because the regressive impact, it's the same tax with the rich and the poor. So uniform rates may look good on paper, but they punish the poor more than the rich. So for this, we need to actually find out a way in which we are able to, find a solution to this also. See, I'm very much happy for this, GST 2.0. At the same time, a kind of balanced or a neutral solutions have also to come up so that the critical or the negative points are also taken into consideration.
Fair enough.
So, I mean, that's one thing
Point
which
taken.
I feel. Yeah.
Right. Point taken, Dr. Nisha Najumuddin,
Because
Professor of
uniform
Economy.
tax is fair. But if it, yeah, exactly. Sir.
Got point taken, Dr. Nisha Najumuddin, A.K. Bhattacharya, and Nitin Desai. Thank you all of you for taking time out to be with us here.